ora, everyone that's joining us. We are just going to give people a couple of minutes, maybe at the most, just to get through the waiting room and into the session. So you've got time to run and get a cup of tea if you need it, maybe.
We had quite a few people enrolling for the webinar, so hopefully all can join today. It'll be interesting to see also what type of questions we get. Will be a good session.
And a little flurry of people jumping in then.
We have
Give it about 30 more seconds.
Perfect. And Osadi, if someone else joins after we start, just let them in and we will continue with the presentation, please. Thank you.
Oh, well, kia ora, everyone, and welcome to our Kai Keepers webinar. We're excited that you joined us today, and for those that are potentially down in the wetter parts of the country today, our thoughts are with you. Now, today we are here to talk about our Kai Keepers program. And we're going to talk a little bit around what we did in the program, but also the key things that everyone wants to know is the insights that came out of that program. And then we'll have some recommendations as well. So I'll just introduce myself. Do you want to flick to the next slide? My name is Nicola Waldron. I'm the General Manager here at the Restaurant Association. And I'll be joined today by Paula Saldias from Edge Impact. And we've been the two project managers from our respective organisations through this project. So the Restaurant Association is a membership organisation. We represent restaurants and cafes around the country, over 2,500. And they've been the ones that have taken part in this pilot. Essentially, we are here to help them to run their businesses better. And we see ourselves as that connection between industry and business, and helping those businesses where food is the hero to run their businesses better. So Edge Impact is a full service global impact consultancy combining science, strategy, and storytelling in partnership with motivated leaders, organizations, and industries to reimagine sustainability and positive impact. So you can see how we've partnered together for this program. Our expertise is definitely that connection with industry, and Edge have got that background knowledge around the sustainability and impacts. So today we've got a little agenda here for you. We've left lots of time for questions and answers at the end. So if you did have a burning question that comes up as we go through this, maybe just pop it in the chat or just hold it for the end. There'll be plenty of time at the end for those. But we're going to take you through a little bit around, briefly around what Kai Keepers is about, what we're trying to achieve, talking about how the program rolled out, the two phases, the findings, and also some of our recommendations. So we will get straight into it because there's lots to cover today. So first of all, just what is Kai Keepers? So across almost 3 years now, we've been tackling the pressing issue of food waste in the hospitality industry. And the idea with Kai Keepers was to work with a pilot group of 120 participants to get some data and insights, first of all, to help us to drive awareness and action across the industry. And I just mentioned that the pilot ran over 2 different phases. So we first conducted a baseline assessment with all of the businesses, and that involved them essentially over a 7-day period, separating their food waste aside from other types of waste, measuring it, and doing a short daily survey and taking some photos. And that gave us that baseline to work back from with the second phase. And the second phase was an intervention assessment where we trialed several interventions, looking at different ways to reduce waste and to test the effectiveness of those initiatives. So we've completed both of those parts of the pilot now, and obviously we've been diving into the analysis and reporting that the pilot has shown us. So the key findings from that first part of the pilot, from the baseline, over that period, over 13 tons of food waste were recorded. And that was across 108,000 covers over that 7-day period. The waste resulted in more than 15 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions, which we put that down to being the equivalent of 70,000 kilometres travelled in a medium petrol-powered car, or the same as traveling from Auckland to Wellington around 110 times. The results from that also sort of indicated that the average hospitality business loses over $47,000 per year to food waste. And it found that each meal generated an average of 134 grams of food waste. And there was a fairly even split between the food waste being around prep and plate waste, 44% and 43% respectively, with spoilage sitting at around 13%. And we identified from the baseline assessment period that there were things like portion control, prep waste, spoilage from cabinet items, and unsold foods were some of the key drivers for that food waste. And so that really informed the next stage of our pilot. So I'm going to hand over to Paula to talk through that next stage.
Thank you, Nicola. So using the findings from the baseline and complemented with existing research, we designed 4 targeted food waste interventions to test with the program participants. And that's what I would like to take you through right now. A bit of a note, when we talk about waste, we made sure that we capture the waste in different categories. So preparation waste refers mostly to like offcuts and trimmings. Plate waste, it will be food left by customers on their plate. Spoilage will be perishables that went off and were not used. And then unsold food were items that never made it to the customers at all. And now we will show you the interventions and the results and the main findings of this program. So the 120 participants were divided into 4 groups. Each group had a control and a test group. The test group were the ones that implemented one of these 4 interventions. And the interventions we tested consisted in the first one being adding a smaller or flexible portion option to the menu. So the venues introduce a smaller serving of one high waist menu item alongside with the original dish, giving customers the choice and reducing the overserving. So, for example, if one of the customers, for whatever reason, didn't want to have the full meal, could have the option of this smaller size dish. Then we have the second option that is turning prep waste into a new dish. And here, chefs got out all of their creativity and repurposed ingredients that were usually discarded during the preparation into a creative new menu item, cutting kitchen waste while adding something fresh to the menu. The third pilot was upselling at-risk stock. So here, front of staff were briefed on items that were near the end of the shelf life, and they were encouraged to promote them before they were spoiled, and so they could get sold on time. And the final one, the fourth one, is redirecting unsold food to staff. And so rather than throwing away food at the end of service, venues gave it to staff to take home or use it as a basis for staff meals. So what you can see here is that the interventions involve different staff members, with some initiatives involving more the kitchen staff, while others involve more the front of house staff. But however, as we will see shortly, the teamwork and communication was a really key success factor for all these initiatives. So if we take a look at the results for all the initiatives, what we found was that the average waste for each meal decreased from 132 grams from the baseline to 112 grams per cover. So that's a 16.4% reduction, representing a meaningful improvement across all interventions. And in terms of cost savings, this is equivalent, this is equivalent to 0.15 cents per cover. On a monthly, $0.15, sorry. On a monthly basis, this reduction is equivalent to 5.3 tons of food waste avoided, preventing over 6 tons of CO2 emissions. And this is equivalent to around 30,000 kilometers of travel in a medium petrol car. When we look at the cost savings, the average hospitality business could be potentially saving $5,520 per year, which is quite significant. Now, I want to walk you through some of the findings for each of the interventions and how effective they were. So for the first intervention, that was offering a smaller or flexible portion options adding that to the menu, we can see that this was one of the most effective interventions with around 20% reduction of total waste per cover. That was the highest overall among the interventions, from 134 to 108 grams from the baseline results. And this is equivalent to $0.27 of saving per cover. The biggest gains were in prep waste. And this was a 43.2% reduction compared to the baseline, and spoilage with around 33% reduction. And we also saw some marginal reduction in plate waste with 1.4%. And what we also noticed was that the customer response was largely positive and very positive across all interventions, this one also being a highlight. If we look now at the environmental impact, Per month, the total waste reduction resulted in 1.4 tons of CO2 avoided, that is equivalent to 6,815 kilometers travel in a medium petrol powered car. And in terms of savings, if we look at this per year, the average hospitality business in this group or that implements this intervention could save up to $8,900, which is the highest of all the interventions we tested. If we now look at the second initiative, that is reuse prep waste in a new dish, which aim to reduce prep waste through menu innovation, I can tell you a little bit about the examples dishes that we saw coming up from the chefs. So, for example, one of them was using potato peels to make something similar to a hash brown that ended up being quite tasty, or using some of the veggie peels to make broth. And we saw like that so many other creative options. Some of the main results for this intervention were around a 70% reduction in total food waste per cover, which is 36.5 grams compared to the baseline results. And this equates to $0.12 of saving per cover. These results were statistically significant. What we saw on the decrease on prep waste, that was a reduction of 28 grams or 55%, which is very nice to see, given that even though we had lots of participants, having statistically significant results with smaller samples can be quite challenging. So we were very pleased to see that this result. And again, we also saw a very positive customer response to this initiative. As part of the context, all the interventions were also supported by communications collateral. So the way that, because you might ask yourself, how did people know about the initiative, or this was a new dish, or how it was prepared? We shared with the participants different communication assets that they could put on the table. They were menu inserts, they were table talkers, and there were also some posters that they could put in the kitchen to incentivize the staff members to implement the initiatives. And so when people saw these table talkers or insert menus, they were immediately asking about what this was about, and then that was a good prompt for the owners and the staff members to tell them a little bit more about what was happening. And that's how we also got to capture this customer response. From the second initiative, looking at the environmental impact, per month, the total waste reduction resulting in an estimated of 1.2 tons of CO2 emissions avoided, and is equivalent to around 6,184 kilometers travel in a medium petrol car. And in terms of saving per year, the average hospitality business in this group, or that could implement this intervention, could save up to $3,400 approximately. And then we also have this third intervention, that was the upsell at-risk stock to prevent spoilage through staff-led sales. And what we saw, this was one of the largest proportional reduction in total food waste compared to the baseline, with a 20% reduction in total food waste, around 27 grams. And this was equivalent in $0.15 savings per cover. The largest source of waste addressed from this intervention was spoilage, with a reduction of 50% reduction, which was the largest proportional drop in this category, and also had a very positive customer response. Again, if we look at the environmental impact of this initiative, per month, the waste reduction resulted roughly in 1 ton of CO2 emissions avoided, which is equivalent to around 5,200 kilometers travel in our petrol-powered car. And then per year, the average hospitality business in this group or that implements this initiative could save up to $7,400, which is the second highest intervention, like the second highest saving figure of the interventions after the first intervention that we saw, the smaller menu item. And then finally, we have our fourth intervention that was redirect unsold food to staff. And here we had a 17% reduction in total food waste per cover, that was around 21 grams from the baseline results. And this is equivalent to 0.14 savings per cover. 70% of the venues also reduce overall waste with the unsold data was mixed a little bit due to reporting changes. And because we mentioned this because we were actually expecting a much higher reduction rate of unsold products here. But as with any project that has a behavior change component, these things can happen in terms of how people also input the data. However, we were able to get these very clear and statistically significant results for pilots after cleaning the results and doing that data management properly. But it's just to say that with any other projects that require intervention and data gathering, these type of things can happen. And on average, we can also see that 704 grams were redirected and saved from food waste. Looking at the environmental impact per month, the waste total reduction resulted in roughly 0.8 tons of CO2 emissions avoided, or roughly 4,000 kilometers in a medium petrol powered car. And in terms of savings per year, the average hospitality business in this group or that could implement this intervention could save up to $5,700 per year. When we look at the combined outcomes, as I said at the beginning, on average, the food waste per cover declined by 16.4% from the baseline. And then the second highlight is that the control group also recorded a smaller reduction of 16 grams per cover, around 12% reduction from the baseline, reflecting that participating in the program, just the fact that people are weighing the waste every day, might start creating more awareness about resource use, contributing to food waste reduction. So just by participating in the program, either if you were a part of the control group or the intervention group, both groups show a reduction in food waste overall. Our third point here is that waste reductions were observed across all major categories, so plate waste, prep waste, and spoilage, with the most notable decreases seen in spoilage and unsold items when we compared with the baseline figures. And when we look at the food waste captured during the intervention period, the main sources were prep waste and plate waste. Although, as we saw, the intervention showed a significant reduction in overall food waste across all the interventions. And finally, the interventions work best when they directly targeted the specific reason why food waste why food was being wasted, and this. Why we made this reflection is because we randomly assigned the restaurants into these four pilots, and of course, some of the interventions were more effective for certain type of venues and restaurants because it will depend on where the food waste is generated, and that will be different if you're a restaurant or if you're a cafe. And that was also part of our learnings. So we also have other overall lessons learned from the program, and I'm gonna hand it over back to Nicola to walk us through these findings.
Thanks, Paula. So yes, we had lots of lessons learned from this, but four key ones were when we looked across the pilot. Firstly, that interventions work best when they align with existing rhythms. From an operational point of view, it was really important that what the businesses were doing was easy for them to incorporate into their daily operations. Trying to get in there and change things dramatically with the way it was running prior was not really going to work. And that was something that yeah, just became really apparent with through the pilot was how well it could be implemented because we'd given a lot of thought around that. And the second lesson really is around the impact that pairing interventions can have. The idea with the pilot was that those businesses that were testing interventions were testing one. But you can see how effective this could be if you were combining more than one rather than relying on a single change in isolation. Things like pairing the portion control interventions with improved prep management. It can help tackle waste from multiple angles at once. So if you think about that, like what the impact really could bring to an individual operation and the wider industry. So a third lesson learned really was around the messaging. And Paola talked a little bit around bringing the customer on the journey, and that was the same. For staff and customers, it was really important that everyone was on board, and we had some like amazing feedback when that was really working well. So framing the changes around, the quality, efficiency, and ingredient care, really helped to motivate the staff. We'll share some feedback from some of the businesses in a minute, but there was some really exciting sort of stories around how engaged the staff became and what the business was trying to achieve. And that's, yeah, I think around the framing is really important. And then, of course, also bringing the customers on that journey as well. Another really interesting thing that we sort of identified was around peer learning, helping to drive innovation. And that was the beauty of us working with, a large group of businesses all at once and being able to connect them. We would go and visit one business and they were sort of struggling maybe with a particular sort of challenge around the food waste that their particular business had. We were able to connect them through with, other businesses that maybe had once had that same problem, or had identified a way to sort of address it and were doing quite cool things. So that is something that we sort of, discovered through the pilot program, but we would really think, really needs to be embedded in, future initiatives of this kind. So if we go on to the next slide, yeah, this is some of just a couple of pilot insights. So, one of the really encouraging things was from the feedback from the businesses. and how much it really did seem to impact a lot of them. This first one, there's a lot of momentum behind it. It felt like it had strength. There were comments around the way that we had built the program was easy. It was simple. There was support there. They didn't all need it, but they could reach out when necessary, just to sense check things and to check in. We were checking in with them regularly anyway. So many of the pilots sort of, they worked out and they streamlined the materials provided and worked out, how to implement it best in their kind of structures and their operations. The initial setup, key is the implementation phase. That's the phase when everyone's a bit like iffy about whether it's going to work for them or not. That is really important, and we sort of put a lot of work into making sure that that was as smooth as possible. And I think that that's been key to the success of the pilot as well, because once people were in the flow of things, very quickly they realized that it wasn't anything out of what they could cope with on a day-to-day, but it's that, and helping them at that implementation stage that really kind of got everyone on board. I probably led on to the next, segued onto the next quote a little bit there. Once doing it a couple of times, everyone realised that it really was pretty simple to implement. So next one, Paola. This was a really cool quote. Love being part of the initiative. The trickle-down effect has been long-lasting for our business, and it really did unify our team and our efforts to reduce food waste. So I think that kind of captures, some really positive feedback that we did sort of get through this pilot. It was not just, the result was not just around short-term sort of, food waste reductions, but it really did sort of help build for these businesses long-term sustainable practices. It helped their workplace culture as well, because of the way that, everyone was kind of encouraged to kind of come on the journey. So that was a really nice sort of sideline to what we were trying to achieve as well. Next slide. So these sort of insights have helped us to inform some recommendations. It sort of touches on some of those lessons learned. The first one really was around flexibility. So in hospitality, lots of different types of venues that operate in different ways. So we needed to build, different interventions that were appropriate for a lot of different types of businesses. And that's been a real strength, I think, to the pilot. You can't assume that there's a one size fits all kind of approach, but we've built something that is adaptable for different types of businesses. So that's very, very key, I think. We did also sort of identify that where the interventions were very closely aligned with daily kitchen operations, that's where they could be very highly effective. And, key throughout this was, I think, to have the buy-in of the head chef through this, as well as the restaurant manager. So the second one is really just to embed those that waste tracking into existing routines, which we've sort of, touched on, just making it become part of normal operations, not an added extra, or, perceived like it's this extra thing that people have to do. And you know, I think that's something that is definitely very important if a business is looking to sort of implement processes like this. The third one was around, that connection. We're always trying to build connection between front and back of house. And I think that that's really important when, the front and the back of house were involved in, engaging together. I think outcomes are stronger. Some of the interventions obviously drew into that competition side of things a little bit more. And, we encourage people to, the businesses to sort of track it, have a leaderboard or around, say, the competition intervention. Things like that, just help to kind of keep people interested, I think, as well. And the fourth one was that, being able to facilitate that peer learning and resource sharing, which I've just touched on with the lessons learned. We just think that that is, a really important thing going forward, being able to share recipes, and or other ideas and insights, because, every business and every kind of person taking part is, they're at different journeys, different stages of the journey. So being able to sort of share their insights, I think, is really key going forward, as I said. So the final recommendations here. So firstly, that focus on the messaging, quality, value, service, across the board, the customer responses were really, really positive. I think the portion size intervention that we did was one where we maybe wondered about the customer response to that, if they were regulars and sort of knew that something had changed there. And that's where, framing is important. But yeah, overwhelmingly, there was a very positive kind of customer feedback. And I think that that is a way that we can help, spread even more change, because hospitality businesses are in that really unique position of having those touch points with consumers as well. So let's kind of really lean into that and work out how we can spread that change into every day in that regard. The sixth one is just around allowing for gradual or phased implementation. And I mentioned how important that implementation stage was to get buy-in with everyone. And really with the pilot, we had this vision that particular groups would start on this date, and they'd all be doing it together. But the reality is that the stars all have to align for a business to be ready to start. And we had to be flexible about that. Sometimes our business was all ready to start, and then the head chef came down sick, and we had to be able to adapt, because that was really important, that particularly those senior staff, they all had to be there on time. No one could be on annual leave, really, when just at the implementation stage. As I said, once people got into it, I think they realized how easy and how quickly they could just do it on the everyday. But the implementation is key to just get everything set up smoothly and everyone feeling like they were ready to get going. And finally, providing clear feedback on the results. It was really important, and as soon as the businesses had kind of finished their part of the pilot, they were very, very keen to sort of know the insight sort of straight away. And I think those feedback loops around, what they'd individually achieved and the pilot as a whole were really key. And I think that that's also, if we look at sort of wider with the team, that's going to be really important, I think, for the businesses as well, as to make sure that the teams do sort of know the difference that it's making and the impact that it is having. So that is definitely a final recommendation that we had there. So, overall, I think the messaging, from this is that, that food waste reduction doesn't have to, it doesn't require complex solutions necessarily. These were all solutions that, someone could pick up and, implement it in their business sort of straight away. They didn't need anything too fancy. They just needed to get their heads around it and have some support to get going. It requires some practical changes, but ones that fit with the operations, and ones that engage staff, that are supported by measurement so you can report back, and sort of show what the effect of their efforts are. And, just reinforcing that also by having that connection with others that are doing it as well. And we think that that is what the pilot has demonstrated, and what we're very keen to roll out more widely, around the country. Now, so we landed on this page, which might indicate that we've just about done with our talking. We do have a KaiKeepers website, kaikeepers.org. And if you scan the QR code, you can find out a little bit more about KaiKeepers. We do have a report that you can download from the website as well, just on the things that we've talked about today, those insights from the pilot as well. We will send it through to you. But if you jump onto kaikeepers.org, then you'll be able to find out more about what we're trying to do. But we'll reach out to all of you and maybe pop the report through to you as well. And just finally, I wrote myself a giant big post-it note to not forget to mention the Ministry for the Environment, but then I did forget to mention them at the start. And then this pilot really has, happened because of the support that we've got from MFE to run the pilot. So that has been, obviously invaluable for us. And the team have also been so supportive as we've gone through this pilot as well. I mentioned, our big goal is to roll this out around the country. And so that's what we're in the planning stages for how we can go about doing that. And I should just mention, because we're very excited, that Auckland Council have also recently, come on board as supporters for the next stage for us. So we're really, we're really excited about doing some more in Auckland in the very near future. But if anyone wants to reach out to us, some more about being involved in the next stages, you're more than welcome to reach out.
Thank you so much, Nicola. I think we have a couple of minutes for Q&A. I'll stop sharing my screen so we can all see. And Aidan, I don't know if we have anything on the chat or any burning questions coming up.
We did have one question just around that, the savings figures around for there was a $47,000 savings, and then compared to the individual interventions. Just to clarify on that one, that $47,000 figure is across all 120 businesses across compared to their baseline. So there's varying sizes in the businesses that participated. The individual savings are based on the groups that were in that specific intervention. So that's much more true to that, that there's also considerations of unavoidable waste and which exists throughout like prep and cooking and things like that. So just that was the only question that I noted. Does the food waste include liquids? Uh, yes and no. Not like your traditional beverage waste, but there are certain foods that like baked beans or something like that, there's like liquid content or soup-based things that was included where possible in the back end of the analysis.
Because one of the things that came out, we had obviously a lot of cafes that make a lot of coffees taking part in it. So if somebody did leave a little bit of their coffee in the cup, we weren't asking people to weigh the liquid leftover coffee, but certainly the coffee grounds were part of this.
We also have a question confirming that it was an average 5,500 each year avoided food waste across the four. Exactly, yes. I'll just double check the exact figure, but yes, that was the average for the interventions.
And I think, yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, you can see the impact that this could have if you were trialing multiple interventions, like the intervention around portion control across more, multiple dishes, or trialing that alongside one where you were creating a new dish from prep waste whilst having a competition around unsold items. Like they're really the impact, could be really significant. And that was something that we got very excited about. Any other queries? You answered them all.
Think so. I can also paste directly here the link to the report. We have it on the website, so it's really easy to access. I'll just paste it directly, and apologies about the link not working. I'll just put it directly in the chat, and then you can download the summary version with all the key results.
And there's just a query that has come through around what's the O2 calculator we use, which might be an Aidan question.
Yes, I can jump in with that. So that tool we actually developed that tool in-house at Edge in consultation with our life cycle thinking team. So they're kind of all over the CO2 and emissions, and they work on a lot of decarbonization projects. So that there was the food waste and costing element, and then the CO2 and the emissions factors element, which we've used in-house data based on industry knowledge to find that. And there is also we also looked at publicly available data as well as an input.
I will definitely get in touch. We're keen to collaborate more.
Fantastic.
Well, I think that might be all the questions come through, but I mean, do feel free to reach out. Yeah, if something does come up later on, we've got our details available. I'll jump on the website. Our details are available there as well. But yeah, really keen to work more with other organisations as we go through the next stage of Kai Keepers as well. And yeah, just really appreciate you all coming along today.
We will also upload the recording to our Edge Impact YouTube channel. So if you would like to share it later, we will share the link to all the participants in case you would like to share it with someone else.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon. Thank you for joining. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.